North Carolina Republicans are at it again. They just pushed through a gerrymandered congressional map, even more extreme than the one that came before it. In Indiana, Trump's plan to gerrymander that state is flailing, and Republican legislators are pushing back on his extreme agenda. And in Missouri, the fight remains in court and consistently trying to battle back against the gerrymander there. All while states are still having elections in places like Virginia and Pennsylvania. Let's jump right in. I'm John Bisignano, the president of the National Democratic Redistricting Committee.
And I'm Marina Jenkins, executive director. A lot to talk about. A lot moving. John, let's start with North Carolina. What we have just seen was maybe the fastest that any of these Republican legislatures have moved in a matter of 3 days. North Carolina, they showed a map maybe last week at some point. Within days, they've passed it through the House, they've passed it through the Senate, and in North Carolina, they don't have to get a governor's signature. The governor doesn't play a role in redistricting in North Carolina, just an odd quirk of that state. And so, it's been a little bit of whiplash over the past week of this just very sudden new map in North Carolina that dismantles a member of Congress's seat, that member of Congress being Don Davis, a member of the CBC, and a district where voters of color have had the opportunity to make their political will a reality historically for years and years before Don Davis had that seat. Par for the course for the Republicans.
Yeah, for those that have not followed North Carolina too closely for a long time, this is the old Butterfield seat that historically has been held by a black member of Congress for quite some time. And I mean, it should be no shock to anyone that they attacked a black member of Congress. I think you can see through all of the states that have already gerrymandered, they're very specifically targeting members of color, both in Texas, Missouri, and now again in North Carolina. It's a pandemic on the Republican side that they're trying to eliminate as many of these types of seats as possible, or at least gerrymander them to a place where it's really difficult for folks to win. And so just to talk about what's happening in North Carolina for a second, before this happened, I would have said North Carolina has one of the most gerrymandered maps in the country, right? But before they even picked up the pen. And yet we find ourselves in a place where they decided to pick up the pen and do it even worse. And why did they do that? Because seemingly Donald Trump told them to. There are a lot of accusations that Donald Trump cut some kind of deal with the Senate president, that the Senate president would get his endorsement for he's running for U.S. Senate. And he'd be able to try and use that Trump endorsement to hopefully be successful in his Senate run. And thus, he decided to pick up the pen and redraw this map and try and gerrymander it as much as he possibly could. So when they gerrymandered it last time, just 2 years ago, they did so at such an extreme rate that a 50-50 state, a state that currently has a Democratic governor and attorney general, also allowed for 10 Republicans and only 4 Democrats to go to Congress to represent that state. Right. That's obviously not balanced. It's obviously not reasonable. But what they did was take one more of those. So they scaled back. What they had done last time was leave one of those seats was competitive and a Democrat won it, being Don Davis, that Marina already referenced. But what we saw happen just yesterday is they passed a map that took that seat, basically turned it on its side and created an environment where it's going to be really difficult for Representative Davis to hold that seat. I hope he still runs. I haven't seen the reports yet. I'm sure he will. But it's going to be a much harder election than it was before. And they made this decision because they really don't care about what voters think. Voters in North Carolina have consistently said that they don't want gerrymandered maps. And apparently Republicans feel as though there are no ramifications for what they decide to do in these states.
Yeah, and North Carolina is like one of the worst actors when it comes to gerrymandering. This is actually the third map that North Carolina has had since 2020. Like, we are halfway through the decade and North Carolina is on its third map. And
with no reason. There's no court cases. There's no, they're only doing it when they are allowed to do further gerrymanders.
Yeah, like so it's just, I mean, this is the extreme situation that we're in now. where it's not just, you gerrymander, as much as you think that you can at the beginning of the decade, which is what North Carolina Republicans wanted to do. But it's like at every cycle now, is this just going to be a reassessment by the Republicans of like, oh, well, we didn't win that seat and we think we should have won it, so we're just going to go and gerrymander it because like we drew a competitive seat by accident probably, and like now they need to go back and fix it because the voters are turning away from them in places where they think they should be winning. I mean, it's just like such an obscene and offensive like approach to representation and like such like disrespect toward American voters that North Carolina Republicans just think they can continually, pick and choose whose votes get to matter more than others, and they're just like going to do this every couple of years. Apparently, this is crazy.
Yeah, it's such disdain for the voters, and it's also disdain for representative democracy. And I know we've talked about it a lot on this pod, but the reality is the US Congress is structured, especially the House of Representatives, to be the people's body. And what is supposed to happen is each state is supposed to elect individual human beings to go to Washington, D.C. and represent them, represent their causes. And what Republicans have decided they are going to do in all of these states is completely skew what that representation looks like. Sending 11 Republicans and 3 Democrats from North Carolina to Washington to represent the people of North Carolina is holistically not representative of the way that those people vote or wanted representation. So it's anti-democratic, it's anti, voter, it's anti basically everything that we claim to hold dear when it comes to democracy.
Yeah, it's just wild. Well, the interesting contrast to what has happened in North Carolina is happening and playing out in Indiana. In Indiana, there are reports and a lot of activity on Twitter and social media directly from legislators, Republican legislators in Indiana, saying, we don't want this. I mean, the amount of courting, to put it lightly, that the Trump White House has done in Indiana is absurd. They have, we've talked about how they brought the Indiana Republicans, to the White House and, tried to sort of get them on their side there. And JD Vance went to Indiana, had a meeting behind a black curtain for whatever reason, trying to get them to do it. There's like further entreaties from the Trump White House. And yet what we're hearing specifically from the Indiana Senate and Indiana Senate Republicans is that they're not interested in Trump's agenda here. They're not interested in doing this. And so the question now is, will they hold or will they ultimately bend the knee to Trump?
Yeah, I think the other thing that's become clear through a bunch of different tweets over the past couple days is it's kind of a small thing, but it does drive me so insane personally because I've worked in the White House. I worked for Barack Obama when he was the president. I really understand and appreciate the amount of time and energy that anything takes in that building, right? Like it's a magical place because you have incredible power to shape the agenda for the American people. And hopefully you're doing so on behalf of the people of the country and trying to do things and make things better. And every single day you wake up in that job and you're stressed and tired and trying to figure out what exactly you're supposed to do. And so there are specific meetings and sometimes like war rooms get set up where you're focused on a bill. You're trying to make sure that members of Congress have the information they need to vote for a bill. You really care about that bill. The president cares about that bill. This is something that obviously happened around the Affordable Care Act, for example, right? Like when there's a bill that a president really cares about pushing over the finish line, they set up a war room. You have a deep understanding of what members of Congress want and what they're trying to do. And the reality that it's become clear that the White House has a war room on redistricting or on Indiana specifically and a whip count where they have individuals that are working for the U.S. federal government using taxpayer dollars to count votes in the Indiana legislature to try and push them to further cheat and gerrymander their map is so insane to me, not just because it's offensive and like they shouldn't be doing that and really they shouldn't be focused on anything political. But beyond that, it's like if they really cared about the American people, they'd have a war room focused on pharmaceuticals, getting, dropping bills for people, inflation. But I think they're so cooked that they know they've already made their bed by passing the big beautiful bill that's just a complete disaster and only going to continue to get worse for people. And they know that. And so they're not even focused. They're not even trying anymore. They're not even going to say, all right, well, we're really focused on bringing down pharmaceutical prices or, grocery prices. Well, we're going to focus on, like, fuck it, let's cheat. That's the only way out. So, like, let's set up a war room. Let's have our whole, bunch of staff on this team focused on calling into Indiana. Let's have JD Vance fly back and forth to Indiana. Let's really push on Indiana to cheat as much as possible. Like, that's their only path out. And it's so weak. It's catastrophic to watch.
It is remarkable to think, like, what if they actually took all of that energy, all of those resources, and actually tried to serve the American people in a way that would lead them to vote for Republicans again.
It's election. A choice.
Like,
it's like
you could do that.
JD Vance could have been flying around on a plane to talk to executives from, supermarket chains. He could have been flying around on a plane to talk to people in pharmaceutical companies, but he's not. He's focused on just trying to push the Indiana legislature to cheat as much as they possibly can. We're living in a very difficult time where you're watching two Americas unfold, where a lower class, everyone below the 1% really, are getting a totally different America. Yeah. And then you're watching the White House completely pander to tech oligarchs and the 1%, and then just trying to use this gerrymandering mechanism to hold on to power as long as possible.
Yeah, it's really something.
It's the end of my TED Talk today.
I liked it. But we have in Indiana a little bit more time, but basically, I think another month or so, to where they're going to have this struggle between Indiana Republicans and the White House. And so, we're watching that very closely. Obviously, I think, Governor Mike Braun of Indiana has said that he may ask for a special session at some point over the next month. He has expressed that he thinks they have the votes, even though the senators themselves are now tweeting out that they are going to vote no. So interesting little divergence of reality going on in Indiana. And Canada.
I mean, but the same thing is true for Indiana legislators. Like the fact that Governor Braun and Indiana legislators, and this went for Texas too, are spending so much time on this. They're not spending time on like trying to make things better for the people of Indiana like they should be. They're spending time trying to figure out if they have the right number of votes to cheat, gerrymander as possible. It's like, this isn't representation. This is, who thinks this is what government's for? Like, no one believes that, we need a government to make sure that they know how to gerrymander themselves into power forever. Like, it's crazy.
Speaking of absurdities, we have a lot happening in Missouri. As you all may recall, in Missouri, there is something called a veto referendum, and that is an opportunity for voters to express their displeasure with something the legislature has done. And if the campaign for the veto referendum is able to gather enough signatures from voters across the state, they can put a pause on the new legislation, including a new map. And what we're seeing is that very straightforward process that is available to the voters of Missouri is being messed with, is being stopped by government officials in Missouri who, again, you have government officials acting in these blatantly partisan ways, where in Missouri specifically, there have already been 100,000 signatures collected of voters in Missouri saying, we do not like this new map. We want to overrule this new map, because the signatures will stop the new map from going into place. And then a referendum gets to go on the ballot, and voters get to go to the ballot and go to the polls and decide whether or not they approve of this new legislation, in this case, this new map. That's why it's called a veto referendum. And so, because
it's like, can I just comment on it for a second? It's like a fail safe, right? It's like what this is. Missouri basically just has a fail safe for the people of the state. If your Congress and governor pass a bill that you hate And it's a pretty high threshold, right? Like people have to hate it enough that they're going to go out and pay a lot of money to try and get signatures and get on the ballot. It's like, it's a difficult process, but it's basically saying, like, if people hate this bill enough, this much, then they get to vote on it, and let them vote on it.
Yeah.
It's reasonable.
Right. Let the people have their say. This is a process that is built into state law in Missouri. And yet you now have these state officials now saying, oh, well, we're not going to count the first 100,000 signatures that have been collected, which is just like, it's just so obviously playing games with this effort and the fact that Missouri voters are so unhappy about what's happened. And they're trying to sort of like just put all these obstacles in the way to get their way, even though that's not what the people want. And you get, especially after like this claim that it's like this Missouri first map. You see this everywhere in every state. Like North Carolina Republicans did the same thing where they're like, oh, like this is, we know what's best. It's so patronizing. I mean, like it just goes back to like such the like the principle that this country was founded against, of like someone, some person at the top of the chain, at the top of the food pyramid, like just saying, oh, I know what is best for everyone, so I'm going to make decisions and you guys don't get to make decisions. That's literally the tyranny that this country was founded to fight against, right? To stop and to flip, so that the people get to decide how they are governed. They get to decide what our laws should be. Like that is the dream and the theory and the whole principle, the whole like founding idea of the United States. And we just now have this incredibly terrible movement. And it's just so like, so obvious and so blatant and so offensive of just these Republican politicians saying like, no, we know what's best, and what's best is what we want. And you guys don't actually get to have a say.
It's the only way.
Oh, all right. Well, speaking of American people, the people having a say, there are elections in like 2 weeks or like less. There's elections happening very soon. Really important elections in Virginia, in Pennsylvania, in New Jersey, and in California, among other places. But let's check in on Virginia first. What's happening in Virginia?
Yeah, they have state house elections across Virginia. It's critical, really important that the Democrats are able to retain that state house. Obviously, there's a governor's election as well, which is a huge deal. Happens every 4 years in Virginia. Virginia is a little unique because you can only run for one term, at least consecutively, and so it's always a new, usually a new face running for governor, and I think it's a pretty exciting moment for that state, especially while, and remember, Virginia is on the border of Washington, D.C. Virginia encompasses a whole bunch of the federal workforce. Virginia has a whole bunch of military workforce in Southern Virginia. And Donald Trump has chosen to close the government for an unknown period of time. And I think we're witnessing that all happen 2 weeks before an election. And this is like a truly catastrophic reality that they're walking into in Virginia. And so I'm hopeful that voters are excited to get to the polls and seek a change in that state from what has been the status quo for some time, at the governor's, at least, with Ralph Northam. So Abigail, come on. Abigail Spanberger is a tremendous candidate for governor. I think we are very excited, and A.G. Holder endorsed her and has been. We've been fans for a really long time. And then just across the way in Pennsylvania, there are state Supreme Court elections that are retention elections, which is a little weird, kind of a nuanced thing. Basically, a retention election is when folks are put on the ballot via a question that says, should this person be retained as a justice? It's not, there's no choice on individuals. It's just yes or no, should an individual be retained as a Supreme Court justice? So I think the individuals that are up in Pennsylvania are all very strong individuals that we've supported over time. I think we would love for all of those folks to stay on that bench. And then I would be remiss if I didn't note there's one more election in California for Prop 50 that everyone should be excited about going to the ballots and voting yes for Prop 50, trying to ensure that California is able to fight back against Texas's brutal gerrymander. And, you know, it brings me back to the reality that this gerrymandering crisis that we're currently in has been such a constant back and forth. And sometimes it's hard for me because I'm so close to it. So I don't know. I try and remember that not everybody lives every single second of this thing. But as we currently sit here, only 3 states have redrawn their maps, and that's Texas, Missouri, and North Carolina as of yesterday. Texas took 5 seats per President Trump's orders. Missouri took 1, and North Carolina took 1. Now, I say take, it's a weird way to say it, but I think I'm just trying to be clear that they tinkered with and drew better districts for Republicans than Democrats in those places. So, talking about 7 seats, California would be the first step in fighting back against that in just 10 days, and the ability to get 5 seats back on the table and available for Democrats that aren't right now.
And so, yeah, California is incredibly important. It's incredibly important for folks to vote yes on Prop 50 in California, and for us to push back on what's happening and the extreme, reckless, dangerous effort by the Trump administration and Republicans across the country who are following Trump's demands to rig the 2026 midterms. Those are the stakes. You know, I think I was out in California last weekend and talking to a bunch of folks who live there and who are interested and chatting about it. And, you know, the where the conversation always sort of landed was like, you know, do we want our democracy, right? Like this is, you know, it's such an important step for us to take to fight back against what's happening in this country and to fight back against Trump and, you know, the ICE raids across the country, in cities across the country, the fact that the National Guard, the militarization of our domestic life in cities across this country, you know, having these National Guard troops deployed, you know, he's trying to deploy them in Chicago. I guess there are now reports that his, you know, wealthy technocratic buddies in San Francisco have decided that San Francisco should not get the National Guard. So I guess that's how decisions about this are being made now. But, you know, the long and the short of it is this is truly about the future of our democracy. And I don't say that lightly or, you know, frivolously. This is such an important step for us to take to assert that this administration does not get to just make decisions for the American people from now until forever, which is their desire. And they've made no secret of that desire. So, you know, I think getting to a point where we can ensure that if the American people want to vote to have a check on this administration, which we think that they do based on all of the polling through the midterms next fall, that is what needs to happen. And that's the goal.
That's right.
All right. Well, there's so much more that we could talk about, but let's save it for another day because every day is a new adventure.
It's real. There's never been a more real statement on this podcast.
All right, folks. If you like our show, please follow us on YouTube and on Instagram at Dem Redistrict. And you can visit our website at democraticredistricting.com. Please get involved in the fight against gerrymandering. This effort takes all of us. You can text podcast, PODCAST, to 36787. Again, text podcast to 36787. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be with you soon. We'll be back soon.
This show is produced by Reed Dudley, Sophia Pedroso, and Manuel Marce. Special thanks to Alex Yang. Editing and mixing by Play Pretend Media. This podcast is paid for by the National Democratic Redistricting Committee.